Hello, good evening, everyone. Today's talk, I want to talk about my journey to self-made. So self-made is basically my journey through transition, becoming myself, and embracing what is my life purpose. And this journey started 5 years ago. I was 23 years old, and I was sitting on my couch. I wasn't very happy with life. I was depressed, and I was very lost. It was a very dark time in my life, where I was confused. I didn't know exactly what was going on. I knew I was attracted to women. I was a female myself, and I knew that something wasn't right. So one day I just researched it. I put in Google search and I searched the word transgender. And I came across an article, and everything in that article described me. My childhood, it described everything, and everything just clicked that day. It was like the last missing piece to the puzzle. And I knew from that moment on that if I wanted to live life to the fullest and I wanted to be happy, I had to transition in order to do so. Otherwise, I was going to be miserable for the rest of my life. So I took on the plunge, and I took on the first step, which was seeing a psychologist. And obviously back then, 5 years ago in Gibraltar, there was nothing. So it was sort of like a journey where me and my psychologist were discussing options, and we were discovering things for ourselves, because no one had ever done it before. And it was a very hard journey. I mean, it took a year to get a referral done to the UK for hormones. And eventually I got there, I went to UK, I started hormone treatment, and 6 months later I got surgery as well. So obviously through that journey, there was loads of ups and downs, but all I can say is it was 100% worth it, because I am the person I am today. And obviously the most important thing for me was the support of my family, and as well, because when you transition, it's not just you who transitions, it's like your whole family, your friends, they transition with you as well. So that was very important. And at the end of the day, we all got there, and I am here today. So as well, when I started hormones, I started joining the gym, and I discovered my passion for bodybuilding. I picked up the weights. It's something that I always wanted to do as a child, but obviously I wasn't comfortable doing it as a woman. And then obviously as I transitioned, I said, now there's no setbacks, there's no holdbacks. So I'm going to do what I've always wanted to do. And I started the gym, and I found my passion for bodybuilding so much that I decided to actually pursue personal training. And at the time I used to look at YouTube a lot. And one of my favorite bodybuilding inspirations was Rob Lipset, and he owns a YouTube channel, and I watched his videos all the time, because when I started the gym, obviously I didn't know much about the gym. I didn't know how to train, how to lift up the weights, and obviously through all those mistakes I learned, and eventually I got better. But as well, nutrition-wise, on YouTube, there was a lot of information on that, so I would just read articles and watch videos, and a lot of things came from Rob Lipset. And at the time, I was also looking at, 3 years ago, I was looking at pursuing personal training. So I was looking at going abroad and looking at personal training courses. And I was lucky enough that Rob Lipset was actually doing his own personal training course. So I decided to go ahead and go for it, because I said, why not go and learn from the best? Because at the end of the day, I also wanted to start my own YouTube channel and be able to inspire people to pursue their dreams. So I thought to myself, well, I best learn from him. So I went on to Dublin, and I went in September. I was there for like 3 months in Dublin, and I got to learn from many different people. I got people who were rugby players, basketball players, people from MMA, and it was a very interesting time. I also got to train with Rob Lipset, who was there at the gym every day, and it was a very, very inspirational time in my life. So much that when I came back, I decided to start my own YouTube channel. And at the time, I remember I was in Dublin, and I was thinking of a name to come up with for my YouTube channel. And also I had Instagram at the time. But I was thinking of going for Zyle Fitness or something like that. But you know what? There's more to life, I think, than fitness and eating healthy. It's more about being inspirational and following what is your purpose in life. So what makes you you? So I decided to go for the name Zyle Life. And since then on, I've been making YouTube videos, and also I post a lot on Instagram stories. And another thing I want to go into now is I'll talk about a little bit about social media, because I think social media gets thrown in around and lots of people say it's bad, but I think it's good. Because you know what, in life, a lot of us were not feeling, I feel like we don't really have self-love. We're all the time being critical of each other, and we need to do things that makes us feel good. So if you feel good wearing an outfit, go ahead and wear it. And do the things that makes you feel good about yourself. So take selfies. A lot of people say, people who take selfies, they're too full of themselves. I don't see it that way. I see it as, today I'm wearing this outfit, today I feel good about myself, or I've just been to the gym and I feel great. So I take a selfie and I post it on Instagram. It's that moment I felt great about myself. So take more selfies. It helps. It does help boost your confidence, and it's not about the likes. Don't go fishing for likes. And another point I want to enter is, don't care about what people think, because this will just hold you back from pursuing your dreams or following what is your passion. It's just going to hold you back. So don't stop caring what people think. I know it's easier said than done, but practice it daily, and eventually you get better. And because something I discovered for myself was, when I started my transition, I said I would imagine like the worst scenario possible. So before I came out, before I told anyone about it, anyone at work, friends, I would imagine like the worst scenario possible, like all the questions that people were going to ask, and I would prepare what I was going to say when those questions came across. So I would always be prepared for what's coming. And when I discovered that I was trans and I was going to transition, one of the first things I did was, I'm just going to live my life as I want to live my life. And I'm going to go for what I want to do. I'm not going to care what people think. And from that moment, I just felt free. Like, it's such a good feeling. You just feel free, and you feel good about yourself. And not just good about yourself, but you want to help other people as well. So another point I want to say is, people will always try to stop you. Like, have you ever started like a new gym or a new diet, and a week into the diet, your friends say, come on, let's go out for dinner or have a piece of cake, and everyone's saying, no, don't worry, it's only one day, but you just started this diet, and already people are trying to like not make you give up, but they're trying to get in the way. Just ignore them and carry on going on about your life. And you know what? You'll discover that in 6 months' time, when you've lost weight or you've pursued that goal, those same people will ask you, how did you do it? So now I'm currently doing a bodybuilding competition this year, which is one of my biggest challenges this year, and it's something I wanted to pursue since I started bodybuilding. So I hired myself a personal trainer. Yes, I know that's crazy because I am a personal trainer. And many people ask me, why do you have a personal trainer? Well, because it's a completely different game. It's one thing to lose fat and another thing to build muscle. But competing is a whole different game. This year, I've learned so much about my body, nutrition-wise and training-wise. I'm training with 3 different people. I'm always, because I'm always asking around people who have competed before, and I'm learning from them. So in life, never stop learning. Always be a student. You're never perfect. You always have to. If you think you're perfect, you're just gonna stay stuck there. You're never gonna grow. So always be a student. There's always room for improvement. And another thing I want to say is, you are the creator of your own life. So you own the book, and you write the book. Don't let anyone write it for you. You make your decisions. And it's never too late to accomplish anything in life. In life, we always have like time limits. Like, oh, by 30, I want to get married. By 40, I want a promotion. And you know what? It's good to have those goals. But if it doesn't happen at 30, it doesn't matter. The goal can always still be there. You don't have to put an end to that goal. I mean, it's okay to go to uni at 30. It's okay to get married at 40. It's okay to buy a house at 45. And it's okay to start a business at 50. It's never too late to accomplish anything in life. And always embrace the journey. When you're accomplishing a goal, always embrace the journey. Like, embrace the hard times just as you embrace the good times. Now that I look back, I think about it, and those hard times made me stronger. Have you ever thought about it? Like a boxer entering the ring for the first time. His first fear would probably be breaking his nose. Once he's broken his nose, he'll realize that it's not that bad, and he'll just carry on boxing. And he'll go in without fear, and he'll go in relentless. And another thing is, happiness is on the other side of fear. Fear just stops you from accomplishing your dreams. So do the things that you fear the most. Sometimes the things that you fear the most are the things that you really want to do. So many people always tell me they want to travel, they want to move country. Well, go do it. You don't have to go in all the way, but do accomplish little goals to getting to your big goal. For example, saving money, finding a job in the area that you want to move to, finding a house, researching the area, make sure it fits your purpose. And basically live life to the fullest. Don't just build a life. Make sure you're living life to the fullest and you're enjoying every moment you can. Because nowadays we're just so busy in life. We're always in our jobs. If not, afterwards, you probably have your kids. And you really stop to focus. You don't focus on what you really want. Sometimes we need to look at ourselves and we need to discover what we want for ourselves as well. It's kind of being a little bit selfish, but sometimes you have to be a little bit selfish in order to have some self-love and really discover what you want in life. So I want to end today's talk by giving you 2 tasks to do today. The first thing is grab a diary and every morning write 5 things that you're grateful for. And it's about the small things in life. Sometimes, for example, I'm always grateful for my coffee in the morning. And just having a roof over your head and yeah, it's just the little things in life. So it will let you start the day positive because no one wants to go to work in the mornings. I'm one of those people anyway. And another thing is find a goal and dedicate at least an hour, or if not, at least 20 minutes that you can a day to that goal. And that's it. Best of luck on your journey to becoming self-made. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. So I'm Luke Stagnetto, and if I may look familiar, or perhaps my name rings a bell, it's because I'm the boy who stood as a candidate at the European elections in 2019. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that experience, perhaps addressing some of the more common questions I've been asked, so the hows and the whys. And as to avoid this talk developing into a rambling monologue perhaps, whereby I recount my anecdotes and stories and you inevitably get bored, I thought it'd be best to use the platform to talk to you a little bit about social media in local politics. After all, as a 21-year-old politics student, social media and politics are two subjects I know plenty about. And at the risk of sounding patronising, I think we could all do with a little more education on. The European elections. We now know that the 2019 European elections were the last time that the United Kingdom and Gibraltar would participate in EU elections. And it almost never happened too. If you cast your mind back to March 2019, a Theresa May Conservative government went to the EU and negotiated a deal which failed to pass through Parliament twice. It was that second time when Theresa May, with a croaky voice, announced over the dispatch box that she was going to have to ask for an extension to the implementation period. Now, what you've got to understand, and I probably won't be doing myself any favours here, is that I'm a bit of a politics nerd. I'm the kind of guy who's got BBC News on TV all the time, and if not, it's BBC Parliament, often to the dismay of my housemates. I read the May deal, and I didn't think it was going to pass through Parliament, irrespective of how many times they tried. Partly because of the composition of Parliament, but also because of that infamous Irish backstop. So, I made a prediction. I predicted that the implementation period would be extended past May 2019, meaning that UK and Gibraltar would have to participate in the EU elections. No one, however, seemed to agree with me. I, on the other hand, was convinced. So with this newfound epiphany of mine, I went to consult my counsel, my dad. That conversation went a little bit like this. I said I want to stand as a candidate this May. He told me to emigrate. I said, seriously, I want to stand as a representative of the ignored Gibraltarian youth and Remain vote. He didn't think the UK would have to put forward candidates. And he ended with that little conversation by saying, "This won't happen, mate." It turns out I was right. It turns out I was right. My dad, who stood as a candidate in 2009, got the ball rolling. And before I knew it, I was having a meeting with the Deputy Chief Minister of Gibraltar, Dr. Joseph Garcia, the purpose of which I'm convinced was to somehow convince him to allow a 20-year-old student with zero political experience the opportunity to not only represent the Liberal Party here locally, but the wider Gibraltarian community as a whole. Soon after, I signed the necessary documents, and it all began. A suggestion made an almost, jest became a reality even more unfathomable. So I've covered how. Why is the question I perhaps get asked most often. Why stand as a candidate in an election when you knew you weren't going to get elected? And this presents no better opportunity for me to clear a few things up. Set the record straight, perhaps. I had 3 clear motivations. Firstly, and I've got to get this right, I was never a Liberal Democrat standing for election in Gibraltar, but I was a Gibraltarian standing for election as a Liberal Democrat. Now, there's a nuanced but important difference there. I was standing to represent our 96% Remain mandate from the 2016 referendum. I was standing because I believed there shouldn't be an election on the rock whereby there isn't a Gibraltarian on the ballot. I was standing to represent the rights and the views of Gibraltarians in the wider European debate. We fought hard for our rights to suffrage at EU elections in the Matthews case 2004, and I thought it was important that that was upheld. It was about flying our flag. It was about representing the people of Gibraltar and telling our story to anyone who would be willing to hear it. And people listened. I did interviews for everyone and anyone who'd take the time to listen to me. The story spread. Oh, sorry, that was meant to come up earlier. The story spread. Picked up locally in the newspapers, social media, radio, and local TV as well. It was picked up by the major tabloids in the UK. Spanish press. I did interviews with French press, Dutch press, and German press. To this day, I have no idea what this says about me. Personally, and most selfishly, my second motivation was, well, it was selfish. It was an opportunity for me to emulate my personal heroes. As I said, my dad stood as a candidate in 2009, and any opportunity to be a little more like him in any way is, in my eyes, an opportunity worth taking. But two, my granddad, who I hope is somewhere here in the audience, was a minister in 1967. He stood on this very stage at the count of the 1967 referendum results. I felt, with the photo of which, by the way, is on the stairs here in the corridor, I felt like I was doing my little bit for Gibraltar just like they did theirs. And for that reason, I will always cherish my campaign. Furthermore, I stood because the narrative worked. It was almost romantic. I was the youngest candidate at the European elections, a 20-year-old Gibraltarian living in the southwest of England, the region in which I'd be representing, studying politics and international relations at the University of Bristol, the mecca of the Remain mandate in the southwest. I knew it would work, and it did. Which leads me to my candidacy. The campaign, and I know it sounds awfully cliche, really was a roller coaster. Through my campaign, I experienced the highs and the lows of political, social media, and politics in general. I learnt in a couple months more than my 3-year degree could ever offer me. It was a crash course. It was a crash course in people, in campaigning. I experienced the beauty and the hardships of grassroots politics, the bits that people don't see, and the bits you don't read in a textbook. It was the coordination of people. It was the door knocking. It was the leafleting. It was the speech writing. People who I hardly knew were volunteering their precious time, come rain or come shine, to help our campaign because they believed in us and they believed in me. I had political giants on my side too, up and down the main street, up and down the hills of Bristol, and across the southwest of England, all to help us and all to help me. I had never felt so popular and never felt so valued in my life. It was truly humbling. The highs were tremendously high, but the lows were pretty low. A little bit of context for you. It was a divisive and contentious election with a highly emotive electorate. Remainers on the one side, as treating the election as a last-ditch attempt to stop Brexit, represented by the Liberal Democrats and the Greens. On the other side of the spectrum were the Brexiteers, heading to the polls to defend their Leave mandate. However, what I want you to bear in mind is that at its fundamentals, the EU elections were an election to form the composition of a parliament belonging to a political and economic union to which we have now left. The whole thing, in hindsight, seems kind of superfluous. but people really cared. To Remainers, I was considered a hero. I was a brave young man representing what he and the people of Gibraltar believed in. I was celebrated. I was inundated with messages of support, in person and online. It was wonderful. To Brexiteers, I was the hostile enemy, wanting to take away their precious Brexit. To them, I was someone who needed to be defeated. And likewise, I received lots of messages from them too. Lots of them. Some of them were honest people with an alternative opinion. We had honest discussions and debates, and I valued it. I enjoyed it. It was educational. Some of them I even managed to convince to vote for me, which was great. Others, however, just weren't so honest. And apologies if you can't see these very well. Others were malicious. They were nasty. They were vile. They were messages designed to hurt me, and they did. I had never been made to feel so lonely or been made to feel so little in my life. My mistake was I was all too happy to share my highs, but I hid my lows. There's this misunderstanding that just because a message is sent online, that it doesn't carry sentiment. And I'm telling you personally that they do. Many of these accounts were anonymous, from what you'd call bots. I know this because they no longer exist. Some of these messages were from local accounts, many of which have also been deleted. Some using local pseudonyms, which looked like real profiles but weren't. With no verification process, however, it is impossible to know who's behind them. They were simply vehicles of online abuse. Which leads me to the 19th of March, 2020. For those of you who haven't made the connection or perhaps just aren't aware, this is the date of the abortion referendum 2020. And it's a date that frightens me. It frightens me because if the messages you saw earlier concerned a bureaucratic debate about regulation and commitment to a political and economic union, well, I'm awfully concerned about the capacity of abuse that may exist in our community when the debate is far more personal, when the debate is centered around a hugely emotive and hugely divisive human rights referendum. I'm frightened because referenda are cruel, cruel instruments of democracy. They present a binary option, an A or a B, to debates which just often aren't so black and white. Worse still, they present a winning and a losing side. The reality, I fear, is that we may all lose as a community. The debate will divide us along lines of gender, by age, by religion, and by personal experiences, no doubt. Dividing homes and dividing families. This is a delicate debate with very personal and very emotional connotations to it. I suspect that we may stand to lose more than we are to gain. Now, the reason I've told you my story today is not to seek your sympathy, but rather your guarantee. Your guarantee that we, as a community, will endeavour to be more respectful towards one another, particularly those whose opinions who we do not share. I'm seeking the guarantee that no one standing up for their personal beliefs would be made to feel as small as I did, be it online or in person. By all means, speak freely, but speak fairly. Don't spread misinformation. Don't be malicious towards one another. By all means, engage in debate, but be considerate, oh my God, be tolerant of other people's opinions. We must be able to agree to disagree. After all, there's far more that unites us than there is that divides us.
Oh, thank you, Julian, for that. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Kellyanne Borge, and I'm a broadcast journalist for GBC. Last November marked 10 years since I started working for the corporation, and when Julian realized this, he offered me a slot to speak today, and my initial reaction was terrified. Despite working on live TV and radio for years now, the thought of, oh, I started too soon, apologies, gives me a little bit more time. So because although I may speak on radio and TV on a regular basis, it's never really about me. It's about the news, it's about music, it's about you. Which charity is doing what, who's being crowned Miss Gibraltar, or who's making it into number 6 at election time. What I did know is that working for GBC has molded my identity as an adult. It's ingrained in who I am today. And in the last 10 years, I've experienced some of my worst and some of my best moments at Broadcasting House. So, where to begin? When I was 18 and about to leave school, I wasn't clear about what I wanted to do when I grew up. Unlike other students, I never had a clear idea about what I wanted to study. All I knew was that I was good at English, I enjoyed it, and I wanted to start making my own money. So I went down the unconventional route of studying for a degree in English language and literature through the Open University, so through distance learning. An option that was never really suggested or spoken about in school at the time, but an option my sister had taken before me. So degree chosen, next step was finding a nice part-time job so I could become a taxpayer and enter the world of adulthood, whilst also work towards my degree. A vacancy for production secretary in the newsroom was advertised in the Chronicle, and my mum suggested I apply. Little did I know back then how that one conversation and that one little advert would change my life. During the interview process, I had to prove I could type quickly and well enough in both English and Spanish, because one of my main responsibilities was to be typing up the news stories while the editors and reporters dictated their hot scoops. Back then, a journalist didn't simply type their own work, it was a different generation. Nowadays, of course, it's a task that's become obsolete. I still remember my first day vividly, fresh-faced and naive. It was to be the first day of my career in broadcasting. In the newsroom, I did secretarial work, mainly typing, filing, operating the autocue for the Newswatch newsreaders, and at home I'd do all-nighters to finish essays and courseworks for my degree. Stephen Niche was head of the newsroom at the time and became like a newsroom father figure to me, and I'll always be grateful for the opportunities and kindness he showed me. He was really a guiding influence. Now, I'd only been working for GBC for a couple of years when on January the 1st, 2011, my mother was admitted into hospital. They'd found a large tumour and the cancer had already spread. Shortly after her diagnosis, I was asked to record a radio advert for a local shop. Its key line was "Cushions galore at the store." My mum had been tuned in from the hospital waiting to hear it all day and messaged me thrilled. She was so proud of that 10 seconds of airtime. I can only imagine what she'd think now. She was my mother, my best friend, and a soulmate, all wrapped up into one very special person. And less than 4 months after her diagnosis, she passed away, just 3 days after my 20th birthday. The suddenness of it, the shock, actually helped me cope. It was almost like I was in denial for a very long time. I was thriving, and people wondered what was wrong with me. When I was at work, I turned my grief into perseverance and determination. I applied for promotions, I organised birthday meals for colleagues, I turned up on time, I didn't just get on with my work, but I did so with a smile. I handed in courseworks, sat for exams, and passed my degree. At times I was even criticised by some people for doing too well, like I wasn't grieving enough. But at home I cried on the floor, I cried in the shower, I cried squashed up in my sister's single bed with her while we binge-watched Grey's Anatomy for days on end. I would cry myself to sleep and wake up in the middle of the night with night terrors, screaming at the top of my lungs like something out of a horror film. I grieved for my mother not just emotionally, not just mentally, but it was something biological. It was a physical loss that's hard to put into words, like losing part of my being. There were just so many different layers to my grief that people just didn't see. So the next year was a bit of a blur. I passed my degree and graduated and applied for a reporter position in the newsroom. And to be honest, I hadn't given it much thought when I applied. It was never really my intention to get in front of the cameras. I applied on impulse, from a deep-rooted need to challenge myself and keep myself busy, to block out the pain and to block out the grief. And so began my days as a reporter. My first interview was with a wedding planner who was doing some kind of event on the Rock, and from there I learned how to speak to camera, how to settle an interviewee's nerves, write a good story, follow up a lead, and perhaps most importantly at the time, how to edit on tape. Yes, we were still editing on videotapes when I first began reporting, and actually learning how to use video editing software on a desktop was a massive learning curve. Now, as we have a relatively small team for the news output we provide on TV, radio, and online, it means we all do a bit of everything in the newsroom. We all write our own material, we come up with our own interview questions, we record, we edit and convert files into audio for radio, or into online versions for YouTube and our website. I could go on about the skills I've learned while working in the newsroom, but they're really quite vast and quite varied. Now, soon after I got the promotion, I started court reporting, and this was a part of the job that I could really sink my teeth into. I covered offences like burglaries and smuggling, but I also covered murder trials, rape trials, child sex cases where defendants were accused of being paedophiles. The witness statements could be chilling and disturbing. And when you're in the courtroom covering a trial day in, day out, you feel like you're a part of the storyline. You go home and try to sleep at night, and you think about the witness who cried on the stand, or the victim who was so traumatized they had to speak from behind a partition so as not to face their attacker. As for the defendants, sometimes it could evoke just as much sympathy. Some of them drug addicts, some suffering from mental health problems, and some were just trying to put food on the table for their families and going about it the only way they knew how. I found the court stories were always the most raw, the most human, and the most real, but also the most challenging. Most of the time, I'd be sat in the gallery with the family of the accused or the defendants themselves as they waited to be called. Sometimes I knew them, sometimes it was polite and amicable, sometimes it wasn't. As I never went to university in the UK, I was grateful to be given the opportunity of travelling for different jobs. Although these weren't leisurely trips, travelling to cover a news story is grueling work. I visited the European Parliament in Brussels to cover some meetings held by the cross-border group with one of our talented cameramen, Darren. It was a fleeting trip, just one night, and I was up for most of that night, making sure my stories and my editing were done for the next deadline. But it was my first trip abroad to cover a news story, and a trip I remember fondly. I also went to the Excel Centre in London to cover a tourism initiative, and I also spent 2 weeks at BBC Scotland in Glasgow in a Broadcasters on Exchange programme. Just entering the BBC headquarters was intimidating, never mind reaching the newsroom where there were hundreds of reporters working in an open-plan office bigger than this auditorium. While there, I worked with 8 different departments and went out on location a few times with the BBC news reporters. The main thing that struck me was how many people it took to put together a single short news report. From writers to reporters to editors, it was probably about a team of 8 people per news piece, and they would spend the whole day working on that one piece, analysing and discussing every word used, every second of footage filmed, which to me, quite honestly, was quite bizarre, because in GBC you're taught how to tackle every part of the process by yourself and quickly, because there's only a handful of you to do everything. When my peers at the BBC learned that we also produce a half-hour news bulletin every weekday evening, they were really impressed. And I have to say I was too. I was really proud. The trip definitely gave me a greater appreciation for our little newsroom here in Little Gibraltar, and definitely made me proud for the content we produce on a daily basis. A question I was asked regularly while there was, but Gibraltar is so small, how do you fill a news bulletin every night? And I explained that during the slower summer months, we sometimes rely on those trusty beach features and the vox pops where we pester you downtown with our microphones and cameras, and we just have to make it work. Now, my trip to Glasgow also coincided with the 2015 UK general election, and I was able to help with some of the BBC's specialist programming, even saw the SNP's Nicola Sturgeon in action campaigning. It was then that I came up with the idea for the Youth Q&A programme for our very own election later on that year, a chance for the younger members of our electorate to have their say and ask questions about issues that matter to them. It's since become a staple in our election coverage, and giving a voice to Gibraltar's youth, even in this little way, is something I'm proud of. One of the best parts about my job isn't the producing or the presenting, but being able to give a voice to the person on the street who feels passionately about something, and being able to give a spotlight to the many worthwhile charities we have in Gibraltar. As I'm sure you're all aware, our community's generosity when it comes to charity knows no bounds. I get to use a platform I have, whether it's on radio or television, to help charities raise awareness, fundraise, and speak about the issues that really matter to them. They do all the hard work, but being a small part of their journey is an honour. So fast forward a few years, and my dear friend and colleague Christine Clifton-Zyle retired from GBC after a long and fruitful career. Once again, I applied for the promotion, and I was made broadcast journalist. They were big shoes to fill. Christine had enjoyed nearly 40 years at the corporation and was a well-loved and trusted voice on the airwaves. The job includes producing our lunchtime news hour on Radio Gibraltar every day, and as well, of course, as being co-host and news anchor every weekday morning on The Breakfast Show with Ben Lynch. And if there are any Breakfast Club members in the audience today, thank you very much for coming. Thank you. So speaking of Ben, he's one of the many people from GBC who's turned from a colleague into one of my closest friends. And that has to be the most beautiful thing about my time at GBC. The relationships I've made with so many wonderful people who've become more like family. The kind of people who'll offer a lending hand when you're up against the clock, offer to work another late shift because you have a family crisis. The kind of people you can laugh with, cry with, and be angry with, and still know that you're friends for life. If I could choose just one highlight from my career at GBC, it would be making these connections. We've suffered losses and grieved together, laughed together, raced towards deadlines together, survived the most stressful of shifts, and also danced all night together at each other's weddings. And let's face it, it's rare to come across colleagues that you also want to spend your weekends with, so I recognize that I'm very lucky. Now, the last 10 years has been full of different challenges, but perhaps some of the trickiest times for me have been when learning to open myself up to being vulnerable on air. There's been a couple of pivotal moments in my career that have asked this of me. When I started presenting The Hub on TV 7 years ago, and then to a greater extent when I started co-presenting The Breakfast Show on Radio Gibraltar, where there's a lot more room for the presenter's personality and sense of humor to shine through. And with that comes vulnerability and insecurity. You're putting your character and your personality out there for critique, and that's something I wasn't used to when it came to the news. News is facts. It's what's happening, when did it happen, who's involved, who said what, it's to the point. Sharing more of myself was a daunting prospect for me. I can tell you that as a presenter, with every broadcast, it feels like you're giving away another little piece of yourself. And to this day, I still struggle with insecurities on a daily basis. With practically every link, I will second-guess myself. I often think, oh, that was so not funny, or Kelly, remember, you're on air, remember what you're saying. I must be doing something right because I haven't got rid of me yet, but those whispers of self-doubt are definitely something I still deal with. Then there are the days where the pressure of being on, of being present and quick on my feet can seem like too much. Days when maybe it's the anniversary of my mum's death, or I'm worried about a family member who's ill, or just having a tough day like anyone will have. And on those days, it can be a struggle to be on air. You just have to do it, it's part and parcel of the job, and somehow I do always find that after a live broadcast, my mood has improved. And even if it's just for a few hours, those problems are pushed to the back of my mind, and all that matters is the show, is the listener, and the viewer at home. Even just one of our regular listeners calling into the radio studio to enter a competition or to ask how we are, it makes... Is that one of our listeners now calling? But even if it's just one of our regular listeners calling into the studio to enter a competition or to ask how we are, it makes such a difference. And it reminds me that perhaps they're also having a bad day and we're helping each other. Maybe they're also sad or lonely, and being able to keep them company via the airwaves is something really special, and it's a great privilege. So that's the emotional and the mental side of things. Don't get me started on trying to read a news bulletin with a blocked nose or a cough, because that is a real skill, I'll tell you. Now, up until recently, I was the youngest member of the newsroom for years. So as a very young woman, I felt like I had a lot to prove. This was sometimes exasperated by comments from the public. In person, face-to-face, it's always, you look much fatter on camera than in person. You'd be surprised how often I get that one. Online, it was, she's not clever enough. She's pretty, but she shouldn't be interviewing people. And don't get me wrong, the lovely comments and the feedback far outweigh the negative. But of course, it was the negative ones that get under my skin and push me even further to work hard, go above and beyond, and prove myself. So perhaps I should thank the naysayers as they push me to succeed. But there are just so many things I feel grateful for. The thrill of being live is like no other, a natural high when you've been racing against the clock and managed to get your story out on air just in time, when you edit your piece just how you envisaged it, or when a stranger stops you in the street to say they listen to The Breakfast Show and you make them happy. I get up before the crack of dawn every weekday, and on Wednesdays, for example, I'm in the station for about 6:30 and back in the evening until 11. And I still drive home with a smile on my face. I'm ready to take on the next day's early shift. So I started working at Broadcasting House at just 18 as Kellyanne Turnbull, practically a child, inexperienced and completely oblivious to where this journey would take me. Today, I'm Kellyanne Borge. I'm married to a wonderful husband, Nick, who pushes and encourages me every day to do terrifying things like this. I'm a broadcast journalist for the national broadcaster, and I'm so thankful for the 10 years I spent at 18 South Barrack Road, and hopeful to take on the next 10 in our soon-to-be new premises. So for those of you who didn't know me at the beginning of this talk, now hopefully you do. Thank you for listening.